All right, so for today, we're going to look at, there's a couple things in this section. Factoring a polynomial. We've done that before, so I'll just do a nice little recap from that. Finding the zeros. What does find the zeros mean? Good. That's another word for it. Good. Zeros, x-intercepts. Do you remember the other words for them? Starts with an R. Roots. Good. Or just find the answers. Just solve the darn thing, okay? And then we will look at, we won't do it today. We'll kind of split this section apart a little bit. Then we're going to look at writing a polynomial from its zeros. So normally it's like you have your equation, you factored it, you solved. And then later this week I'm going to give you, here's the answers. Can you work it back to where it came from? So we're just going to kind of undo everything. So first thing, find the zeros, or just find the answer, solve it. So if it's y equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 15x. I mean, we can graph that, right, because it's y equals. But without graphing, can you solve it? 0 means I want to find the x-intercepts. What's the y value at that point? If it's on the x-axis, what's the y value? It's 0. So instead of it being y equals, we'll switch that so that it's 0 equals the equation. Again, that's why I like the word zeros, because it helps remind me to set them equal to 0. All right, so if you were factoring, what's the first thing you're going to do? Good, let's take out the x. So take out the x. We'll have x squared minus 2x minus 15. And then we'll try to break this down to our two sets of parentheses. Last one's negative, so what are your signs? Plus and minus, good. Options for A, 1 and 1, so just 1x, 1x. And then 15, 1 and 15, or 3 and 5? 3 and 5, which one should be negative? Good. All right, so we went ahead and factored it, and now can you tell me what the answers are? So x equals negative 3, positive 5. What's baby brother give me? A 0. He actually gives me an answer this time. Right, because what we're doing is we're setting each of them equal to 0. So you'd have x equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, and you'd have x minus 5 equals 0. So solving all of those, that's where we got the 0, negative 3, and 5. Yes. X cubed means you have how many answers? I have 3. So I have 3 answers. This is where it's so important that you look back when you're done, how many answers do you have versus what was the degree? They should match. If it says it's x cubed, you better have 3 answers. Okay? All right. So find the zeros and then sketch a graph. So don't graph that in your calculator yet. Okay? Some of you look terrified right now. It's all right, we got this. All right, so let's solve it first. So instead of y, we're going to put in a 0. And then I'll go ahead and pull out that x as my GCF. So x squared plus 3x, oops, minus 10. Then we'll go ahead and factor that further. What are your signs? Plus and minus. Options for A, just x and x. Options for C, 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. 2 and 5. Which one's positive? The 5. All right, we said each part equal to 0 and solve, which I told you at this point I'm going to kind of stop writing that step. So what does baby brother give me? 0. And the next one gives me and positive 2. Now, double check, my original problem was x cubed, and I have 1, 2, 3 answers. So that does match up, so I know I'm good. So to sketch a graph, does sketch a graph mean I have to be real exact? No, it just means what's a rough idea what it looks like. Well, let's go back to what we worked on Friday. What's the end behavior? Squiggly up, squiggly down, happy face, sad face. It was x cubed, so this is odd. and the number in front is positive. That should be a squiggly up, right? We know it should be something like that. Okay, well, what do the answers tell me about the graph? Where are those? Yeah, that's where it's going to cross the x-axis, right? So I know it's going to cross at 0, -5, and a +2. Okay, I know it goes through those, and I know the end behavior looks like that. Could you take a wild guess at what it kind of looks like? You should be able to, right? I know it's going to be pointing down on the ends. It's going to cross through that point. It's going to cross through that one, and it's got to finish up. It's got to look something like that. What's the only part I guessed on? Yeah, like those curves up in between there, right? I don't know how high. They could have went super high for all I know. I have no idea. But that's my rough guess as to what it looks like. Grab your graphing calculator. Let's graph it. How close were we? All right, so remember to go back into hit y equals and graph the original equation. So x cubed plus 3x squared minus 10x. Be careful, you guys, when you're typing that in. When you hit x cubed, your cursor is up at the top. Make sure you arrow to the right to drop down so you don't type the rest of the problem all as an exponent. It makes a very weird graph sometimes when that happens. And then when you hit graph, how close were we? Yeah, that first curve actually, my calculator went to 10, it's out of the screen, right? It went up past 10. But the other one's not terrible. I could have went down a little further, but when it says to draw me a sketch, it's a rough idea what it looks like, right? It's got the right end behavior. On the left is pointing down, and on the right is pointing up, and it went through the points that I found. Okay? So homework tonight's going to kind of look like that. I'm going to give you a problem. I need you to go ahead and solve it, and then draw me a rough sketch of what it looks like. And that's by using that end behavior. You can kind of get an idea what the graph looks like. AJ, were you going to come see me for notes, or are you just going to sit back there? AJ, don't just sit there. You're welcome. All right, so number 3, find the zeros of each function. So again, we're going to set it equal to 0. Is there a GCF on this one? Yeah, I can take out an x again. So then I have x squared minus 13x plus 36. All right, we'll break it down our 2 sets of parentheses. Last one's positive. Both plus or both minus? Both minus. Good. And I know it's x and x. A lot of options on 36 there. What's the option that works to give me the 13? Do we need to list the numbers? We have 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. Which one? 4 and 9. Good. So then when I set each one equal to 0 and solve, baby brother gives me 0. And then positive 4, positive 9. If I asked you to draw me a rough sketch, could you? Right, I would know that it would cross at 0. So I'd have a point at 0, a point at 4, and a point at 9. He doesn't want to move. All right, what's the end behavior? This is odd and positive. So my end behavior is squiggly up. So again, I need to make a squiggly up that goes through those points. So it goes up and down. How far, I don't really know. But I can give you a rough idea what it looks like. All right, why don't you guys try the next one and give me a rough sketch of what it looks like. All right, guys. So we set it equal to 0. should have taken out what for a GCF? Go ahead, take out 2x. So we have 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. Whoa. Come back here, 0. All right, we'll do this the slow, painful way. There we go. Oh, and I lost the parenthesis. All right. So from there, how did we break it down for signs? Good. 1 plus, 1 minus. Options for A, 1 and 2. So 1x, 2x, 1 and 5. You want to go 1 and 5 or 5 and 1? 5 and 1. That gives me positive 10x minus 1, which gives me positive 9. So I know I'm good. Solving, what does baby brother give you? I heard someone say 2. Remember, you would set these equal to 0. So if you go to solve this, 0 divided by anything is just 0. So we get 0 for an answer. Here we get and positive 1/2. All right. So if I would draw a sketch, right, I know it's going to cross at 0, -5, and half. I made very tiny hash marks there. All right, and then end behavior at the beginning was odd and positive, so it looks like a squiggly up. So I know it's going to go up through here, down. Forget real tight there. Did anybody graph it in the graphing calculator to see how it compared? I know at least one did. Jace, how high did that really go on that side? Yeah, on the left. How high did that really go? Yeah, super high. I walked by and saw his graph, and it was like completely gone out of the screen. All right, but that's an idea, rough sketch of what it should look like. All right, what about number 5? How many answers will I have on 5? I should have 4 answers. All right, let's set this equal to 0. And then please tell me there's a GCF in there. Those numbers are huge. So GCF? 3? Yeah. Anything besides 3? There it is. 3x squared. Don't forget those variables. All right, so take out 3x squared. We're left with x squared minus 16x plus, what was that, 63? Whew, Monday morning. Mental math is hard on a Monday morning. But look how much nicer those numbers look taking out that GCF. Much more doable. So 3x squared, break that down. What are my signs? What? 2 negatives. You guys can talk to me, it's okay. Some of you will whisper, that's about it. All right, options for A is x and x. Ooh, 63. Let's see, 1 and 63. 3 and 21, 9 and 7. Or which one? 9 and 7. All right, so set each one equal, and what are my answers? I heard 9 and 7. Oh, 0 what? 0, 0. I got 2 of those out front. Right? It's 3x squared. That means I have 2. If you think about setting them equal to 0, right, you would have divided by 3, so then you get x squared equals 0. Take the square root, square root of 0. 0, but typically when you take the square root, what comes with it? What signs? Plus or minus, which 0 is neither positive nor negative, but it implies there are 2 of them. Okay, so I do have 2 zeros. And also a nice little red flag is right from the beginning I said, how many answers should you have? 4. So there are 2 zeros for my answers. Now, what does that look like when it comes to a graph? If you would sketch this, right? I know it crosses at 0 and 9 and 7. Now, what's the end behavior? Smiley face. I'm happy. This is positive. So it's a smiley face. So I know my ends should be pointing up. But what's going on in between? So how do I make both ends go up, but I have 3 points there? So you would start up. If I start up and come through this one, up through that one, and go, but then I'd cross the x-axis again. But if I cross it, that means that's another answer. What does that mean? Nothing's actually wrong. Grab your graphing calculator. Let me see what happens here. Graph this the original equation. It's one of those cool nuances in math. You may not think it's as cool as I do, but I like it. It's beautiful. Does that look weird to anybody? There's nothing there. What the heck is that? All right. I want you to see what's going on, because you see like a thick line right on the y-axis. You're like, I don't know what that is. But do you see it crossing at 7 and 9? You see those crazy lines? All right, everybody hit zoom for me. Hit zoom in, which is option 2. Your cursor should come up right flashing in the center. Do you see a dot blinking right in the very middle? Hit enter again, so it zooms right into the center. I can see a little bit better, right? But it's still weird. Hit zoom again. Zoom in. Hit enter when it's flashing in the middle. What's it doing? She's like, what? It comes down, and does it actually go through it? Did it cross over the x-axis? But did it touch 0? It comes down and we call it a bounce. It like bounces off 0 and comes back. It didn't actually cross through it. And that happened because 0 was an answer twice. If it shows up twice, it bounces. It doesn't actually cross it. It just bounces off of it and comes back up. So that will help me make my end behavior both be up and not cross an extra time through the axis. Every time you cross that axis, it implies that's an answer. So we don't want to do it unless it's really an answer. So it's going to start at the top, come down, just kind of bounce off of that one and come back. And then it crosses through and crosses through. So if it shows up an even number of times, so even if that answer showed up 4 times, it's going to bounce. If it showed up 6 times, it's going to bounce. Okay, so make a note to yourself, guys, in here. If an answer appears an even number of times, the graph will bounce off that number. So if an answer appears an even number of times, like that 0 showed up twice, it bounces off the 0. It does not go through it. So what do you think that means if an answer shows up an odd number of times? It actually doesn't bounce. It goes right through, because what happened at 9 and 7? It crossed right through it. So if that answer showed up 3 times, it's still going to go right through. Okay, so we can add that onto here. If an answer appears an odd number of times, the graph will cross the x-axis at that point. If an answer appears an odd number of times, the graph will cross the x-axis at that point. So again, keep in mind every time you make a graph, if you show that graph crossing the axis, that better be one of your answers. Okay? So if it shows up an even number of times, it's just going to bounce off of it and come back whatever direction it was already going. If it's an odd number, it's going to actually go all the way through, which sometimes is a little deceiving, because as we get going in this chapter, we'll be looking at the graphs and being like, okay, I can find some nice answers on here, and you think you find, like, it went through, you're like, yeah, that answer showed up once. And then you go through and all you're solving, and you're like, really? That answer actually showed up 3 times. It's the same answer. But you don't realize that by looking at it. All right, let's try number 6. So set it equal to 0. Is there a GCF? 5x squared. There you go. So we'll have 3x squared plus x minus 4. Set up your 2 sets of parentheses. What are your signs? Good. 1 plus 1 minus. Options for A. So 1x, 3x, and 1 and 4, or 2 and 2? 2 and 2. If I check that, that gives me 6x minus 2x. Keeping in mind, I'm trying to get a positive 1. Does that work? No. So that means my 2 and 2, probably not a good choice. All right, you want to go 1 and 4 or 4 and 1? 1 and 4. 3x minus 4x. So my signs are backwards. That'll give me negative 3 plus 4. That one's going to give me the positive 1. So again, just make sure you're careful, you're checking. Don't just throw numbers in there and assume it worked. All right, solving, what does x equal? Baby brother gives me 2 zeros, and then positive 1, negative 4 thirds, right? Subtract 4, divide by 3. And if you draw me a rough sketch, so I know at 0, 1, where's negative 4 thirds? Say that again. Mm-hmm. You're on the right track. Switch negative 4 thirds to a mixed number. Or divide it, either way. What's negative 4 divided by 3? So that's negative 1.3, or negative 1 1/3. So it's actually just past negative 1. Right? It's about 1/3 of the way to the negative 2. So this is one time where improper fractions aren't my best friend, right? They're harder to graph. But if I know what it is as a mixed number, or if I know it as a decimal, then I can kind of figure out where the point is. And again, it's a rough sketch, so it don't have to be exact. All right, what's the end behavior? What's that look like? Go back to the beginning. Even and positive. That's a smiley face. Again. So I'm going to start up. And what do I need to make sure I make note of? It's going to bounce off of those zeros. So starting up, it's going to cross here. It's going to come up and bounce off of 0, and then cross the other one. If it only showed up 1, 3, 5, 7, whatever odd number of times, it crosses it. It only bounced off the 0 because it showed up twice. How are we doing so far? Okay? Seeing how that factoring, the answers, the graphs, the end behavior, how all that kind of goes together. All right. So what are the zeros of f of x equals 2x minus 3 times x minus 3 times x minus 3? Is this easy or hard? Should be easy, because what form is it in right now? Is it in standard form? No. What is it in? It's in factored form. It's already factored for you. People see these and like panic and start multiplying things together. I'm like, what are you doing? It's already done. It's already factored for you. So x equals, you guys are killing me today. Thank you. and 3. Good. So how many times is 3 a 0? Twice, yeah, 2 times. So what does that tell you? It will bounce. It will bounce off 3. Good. What are the zeros of f of x equals x to the 4th minus 6x cubed plus 9x squared? What form is that one in? It's either standard or factored. It's my only options. That's standard form. So I need to actually factor this one. All right, so GCF? Thank you. So we'll have x squared minus 6x plus 9. Set up your 2 sets of parentheses. What are your signs? 2 negatives. So we have x and x, 1 and 9, or 3 and 3. 3 and 3. So then what does x equal? What's baby brother give you? 2 zeros. And I have 2 3s. So how many times is 0 a 0? It's fun to say. And there's a typo on here. That should have a positive 3 on it. How many times is 3 a 0? 2 times. So what does that mean? Good. It will bounce off 0 and 3. So it's going to bounce off of both of them. Questions on anything we've covered so far?